46 years ago, the United States severed diplomatic ties with Taiwan for China. In hindsight, was that a good policy?
There's no question that we ignored and devalued the political progress and political rights of the people of Taiwan in pursuit of a hopeful or optimistic approach towards dealing with China.
So do you think the U.S.-Taiwan relationship will undergo fundamental changes under President Trump?
I do.
Welcome to Zooming In. This is Simone Gao. Every new administration does rebalancing of foreign relations of some sort. The U.S.-China relations have been fine-tuned for decades from the Nixon era to the Obama era. Now that fine-tuning is disrupted by the Trump administration. President Trump calls for Americans to wake up from decades-long wishful thinking about China. Will there be a reshuffle of the most important bilateral relationship in the world under Trump? How would that affect Taiwan, Communist China's rival and an extremely important ally of America, and a friend who felt betrayed but never left? I discussed these questions with Mr. Stephen Yates, who served as Deputy National Security Advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney and Idaho Republican Party Chair. Mr. Yates is the CEO of consulting firm DC International Advisory, and he spent years of his life in Taiwan.
At the APEC meeting, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence met with Morris Chang, who is leading Taiwan's delegation at the summit. APEC is the only major regional forum that includes Taiwan as a member. However, Taiwan has never been able to be represented by its president at the annual gathering due to opposition by China. According to Taiwanese media, the Pence-Chang meeting is the highest-level interaction between the United States and Taiwan at the APEC summit. Meanwhile, Pence did not have a sit-down meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
This is probably another blow to Xi Jinping at the APEC meeting, since Beijing is super sensitive as to who is meeting the Taiwanese at an international stage. The Pence-Chang meeting is everywhere in Taiwanese media, but does Taiwan feel truly secure with this administration? 46 years ago, the U.S. severed diplomatic ties with Taiwan for China. That left the Taiwanese people feeling that Taiwan is just a piece of a commodity to the U.S. It can be sold for a higher profit at any time. Do you think that could be the case again with this administration?
Well, I mean, I get this question all the time in Taiwan. There's a massive anxiety about being treated like a bargaining chip. And no one wants to feel like they're just that simple chip. They are a nation, a proud people, a democracy, a significant economy, very well educated, integrated with the world in many, many ways. And they want to be treated with respect, dignity, and all those other things that people naturally want. So they're doing everything that they're supposed to, and yet still feel at risk of being sold out. And so that anxiety is very, very real and pronounced in Taiwan. And unfortunately, Taiwan has, in fact, been used as a bargaining chip. The people of Taiwan had no vote over whether they should stay in the UN or, as Chiang Kai-shek's government decided, out of protest, to withdraw from the UN when the PRC finally won the General Assembly votes to enter in. They didn't have a say in whether to advocate a one China, one Taiwan policy, which the United States was probably prepared to accept in the early 1970s. They instead were governed by a dictator that said, no, there is a one China policy, and the Republic of China is that one China, and we will not concede, and we will retake the motherland. And that was, of course, crazy talk. But so the people of Taiwan have been sold out in a number of different ways. More establishment or traditional foreign policy experts have come up with nice phrases to try to make this sound okay, but there's no question that we ignored and devalued the political progress and political rights of the people of Taiwan in pursuit of a hopeful or optimistic approach towards dealing with China. And so I am much more critical of the approach that has been taken, much more critical of what I see as establishment foreign policy thinking on this. And the people of Taiwan are not wrong to have that anxiety. It is clearly possible that this administration or any administration could reach yet another deal with China that would be to Taiwan's disadvantage. That's possible. I don't think it's as likely just because President Trump thinks differently than most American presidents ever do. And there's some debate about what it means to be a nationalist. But one thing for sure is if he's making unnecessary accommodations on Taiwan to try to get a deal with China, that's weakness. And President Trump hates to appear weak. And so there are some elements of his natural approach to policy that should be reassuring, that he's not someone that is going to be happy with or rush into making unnecessary concessions. And I think a lot of the concessions that American policymakers have given on cross-strait issues or dealing with Taiwan generally have been out of unnecessary weakness on the American side. So this whole idea that we can't allow leaders of Taiwan to freely visit the United States, it's a profoundly un-American policy. It's also one that we have not followed consistently with other countries with whom we don't have diplomatic relations. And Taiwan now is the only democratic society on the planet that we don't allow leaders to come freely to our country and engage our people. So I don't think that President Trump is as likely to be susceptible to that temptation to make those concessions as other leaders have. He's not interested in new world wars, major power conflicts. One of the reasons he built a coalition to get elected president was to pull back somewhat from a perceived overextension of American engagement in conflict. He was a critic of the war in Iraq and somewhat a critic of the war in Afghanistan, which still goes on. So he would be susceptible to the notion that, well, if you engage in these policies, it increases the risk of conflict. But I think that to his core, he believes in peace through strength, and that the best deterrence against some kind of a conflict with China is the reality, but if at the very least a perception, that he's just crazy enough to fight, and that America is stronger than it's ever been. And that, I think, is the narrative that he would like to go into negotiations with. And until that changes, Taiwan is relatively in a safe space in terms of being a victim or a bargaining chip in that kind of back and forth. But the great game for President Trump very much focuses on rebalancing, recalibrating the U.S.-China relationship on security, economic, and other areas. And if that rebalancing occurs, I think he genuinely is open to a business-like, friendly relationship with China. Not necessarily the Communist Party, but with China and the Chinese people. So it's not an anti-China policy. And I think he believes that. So whether I'm wrong in my faith and the Taiwan people are right about their anxiety, we'll have to see. But for now, I think there's very low risk of the American position towards Taiwan getting weaker. And I think there's a very high likelihood of it getting stronger.
And you think this is an opportunity for Taiwan?
It is. I have some sympathy for the people of Taiwan. I've spent a part of my life coming and going to Taiwan. These are people who endured many decades of colonization and a dictatorship, martial law, and then through all of that, even with diplomatic isolation. still emerged with a very competitive, vibrant democracy, successful economy, a good, well-meaning people who seem to have world-class food that is there to welcome any guest at any time. Clear, positive value to add to the world and its neighbors. And so I think that it's incredibly important to not just do them a favor, but honor our own values by making sure that we are not imposing pain and restrictions on people who have chosen this good path in so many other ways. I also think it's a very important example to all Chinese people that they, at some point in their own way, if the people in Taiwan can outlive a Leninist dictatorship and martial law and organize themselves to make their national leaders have to submit to their will, well, then the people in Jiangsu province can too, Guangdong province can too, and other areas of China can too, and should. So to me, that's the other reason to make sure that the U.S. leadership and our policy reflects the value of what has happened in Taiwan.
Have they? I was going to ask you this. Has the U.S. leadership reevaluated their Taiwan policies, especially the one from 46 years ago, and see if that was a good decision after all?
There has not been a systemic questioning or review of that, at least to my satisfaction. And there are a handful or more other experts on China that are around Washington and around the United States that have been in and out of government the way I have. And we all basically see a significant weakness in the concessions made from the Nixon-Kissinger consensus to the present. We have felt the power of the criticisms of the Communist Party against what we do in our careers, against our ability to travel freely, and from the business community in the United States, feeling as though it has to accommodate the Communist Party's point of view if they want their businesses to be able to enjoy the benefits of this rapidly growing economy over the last several decades. And so we are a minority view. But I think that President Trump is the first opportunity to have a president that is open to practicing true realism. And true realism means seeing power and weakness for what it is. And if you truly believe in advancing your national interests and are engaged in a global competition to try to create as much advantage for your own people as you can, and I think that's what President Trump's policy is fundamentally, then we have an opportunity to break away from some elements of that. But you will know that that policy has finally been subjected to review when we stop using the words "one China." Because the words "one China" is a form of communist manipulation and control. If they're able to control the words that we use for our own policy, a policy that makes no sense in the English language, then they're able to control our thoughts and our options and our actions. And for 50 years, the Communist Party of China has been able to control American leaders' thoughts, options, and actions with regard to dealing with China. And President Trump has not escaped that entirely, but he's the first American leader in a generation plus to show some signs of looking in that direction and trying. And so whether it was President Trump or any other elected leader of the United States that proves an openness and a willingness to do that, I want to support that.
So do you think the U.S.-Taiwan relationship will undergo fundamental changes under President Trump?
I do. I think there's elements of that relationship that will become more normalized. Whether there is a formal diplomatic recognition is an interesting question. I think that is possible, but perhaps unlikely. But much more normalization of the defense relationship with Taiwan. Fundamentally, the Trump administration seems to believe that allies and security partners that have more independent deterrent capability of their own is a greater and more effective challenge to Chinese aggression. And so whether it's Japan, Taiwan, other partners, having greater independent deterrent capability is seen as positive. And that will feed into more of a normalized defense or security relationship with Taiwan, I believe. And you hear words along these lines coming from the current Defense Department. It could and should lead to more normalized trade and investment relations. For far too long, we've sort of said, well, we can't have a bilateral investment treaty with Taiwan because the word treaty implies statehood, and these are the verbal games that the One China policy has been able to control the thoughts, minds, and options of American decision makers. When they sort of sober up and wake up and they realize, oh, we can engage in a legal agreement with whatever entity we want to, and China has no control over that. Then we can say, you know what, there's opportunity for America and opportunity for Taiwan to engage in a new trade and investment relationship. And if we set high standards in that, it will help America's negotiations with other partners in Asia and elsewhere. And so there's an opportunity there, but it'll take two to tango, as they say. It'll take some innovation and boldness on the Taiwan leadership's part, and it will take a willingness and an openness from the U.S. government. I think that the most important parts of the U.S. government are open to this now. So really the opportunity is there, and when Taiwan emerges from its political competition at home, maybe there will be some proposals that will be evidence of this trend being manifest.
November 24th is a big election day for Taiwan. The Taiwanese people will elect almost every level of their local government. It will be a democratic display for the world as well. Just as Mr. Yates puts it, decades of colonization, dictatorship, martial law, with diplomatic isolation up until now have not deterred the pursuit of democracy in Taiwan. Taiwan is a touchstone for whether the Chinese people are capable of democracy after all. And that judgment is as essential to the mainland Chinese people as it is to the rest of the world. Thanks for watching Zooming In. I'm Simone Gao, and see you next week.